Good afternoon. Welcome to Recovery Solutions with Amanda Marino. And Sarah, if you could please start to introduce yourself while I get Instagram to go up.
Yes, of course. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Sara Sefret. I am a certified child life specialist, a trauma specialist, and I do a lot of work with early intervention. And I have founded a practice called Soul Skills, which our mission is truly to innovate what healing looks like for children and families at any age throughout lifespan. So I'm so excited to be here and just kind of a meeting of the minds to collaborate and really equip you guys with some tangible skills and insight to feel supported and empowered the rest of your day.
Awesome. So what got you into this work, Sarah? Like what started you and what's your background, and just share a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, growing up, I had always struggled with anxiety and depression, and I met with traditional therapists, psychiatrists, and they have all been a really significant part of my healing. But I always felt that there was something that was missing, and I couldn't quite figure out what that was. However, I was determined once I figured it out, I wanted to share that. And what I found for me was I wasn't necessarily learning the tangible skills to help me outside of session. I had phenomenal providers, and they have been huge resources for me personally and professionally now.
Yes.
But what I found was this niche that it was missing was in coping skills. I needed to learn a coping skill that I could use at 11 p.m. when I was having a panic attack, or at 7 a.m. when I'm running through intrusive thoughts and need to get out of my own way. And
Yes.
so I went to school. I studied child development because I understood that so much of what we struggle with as adults goes back to our early childhood years, whether we like it or not.
Yes.
And
Everything goes back to that. And
yeah,
I mean, there's so much more. It's more talked about today, but I think, the past generations had no idea, you know?
no idea. I think people did the best they could with the resources and the education that they had. And we are so fortunate to have more of that knowledge now. And it's what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I took that and I became a certified child life specialist, which I worked in a traditional setting in a hospital. So basically, what that means, because most people are not familiar with it, is
Hmm.
I provided all different types of therapeutic support from developmental perspectives. So I did a lot of new diagnosis education, a lot of mental health support. I did a lot of teaching coping skills to develop resiliency. And it was so wonderful in helping these children in a hospital setting thrive. But I realized we all need this. And so I did a ton of research and figured out there was one missing gap of coping skills. And then there was another missing gap specifically for families. And it was provider collaboration with parents
Yes. Huge.
because
We're big
it's
on,
huge.
yeah, we're big on, we make sure there's always, if there's, young person, there's always at least one person on the family side involved in the care, because it has to be both sides.
It makes a huge difference. And I think that's one of the things that is really so incredible about Next Level and with Soul Skills is understanding that when one person is impacted, the entire family is. And so if we want to come from a family centered approach, we need to look at all those dynamics. And so
Yes.
that's kind of how Soul Skills started. And so since then, we have worked with clients all over the US. We actually now have some clients in Australia. And we have helped them work through so many different facets of adversity. Our team has expanded to early intervention specialists, mental health counselors, and we really work to give children, families, and adults the skills that they need to be resilient for years down the line.
Love that. I love that. And, we had a few topics that we had gone through. So for anyone who's just watching for the first time and doesn't know me, I'm Amanda Marino, the co-founder of Next Level Recovery Associates. I've been doing this show, Recovery Solutions, for quite a while. And I like to bring on various professionals to, put some quality content out there and to educate people with some good things, because there's so much misinformation on the internet. And so I've kind of taken it as my responsibility to find like awesome professionals to bring on and highlight. And so Sarah's my first guest after a hiatus. I took a little break because I had some traveling and moving and things like that. I actually don't have like my normal setup. So I had to find somewhere random in the house to set up today. So thank you for joining us. If you have any questions for Sara and I, we're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, on kind of all of my channels. I'm not sure if you were able to set up yours on there as well. There's one person ever that did set up their own channels on there, but I don't know how to do it from the other person. So.
I'm going to have to ask that person.
And then also you'll be, given clips and things like that to reshare. So okay, so we narrowed it down to this topic of how to get out of victimhood and propel into resiliency. And I think it's something that I haven't really covered, in a lot of the series that I've done. I've had a lot of different therapists, a lot of just different leaders and things like that. So, why this topic? Like, you shared what your background is and what got you into doing what you're doing and what your organization does now, but like, why this topic? Why was this one of them?
Yeah, I think when we look at the adversity that so many of us experience, it is a universal truth. At some point in our lives, many times we are going to experience adversity. For all of us, it looks different. It may be a divorce, it may be, a diagnosis, it may be relocating. I mean, there's so many different pieces of adversity. And the one thing that is universal that is going to help people get through it and heal and grow and evolve is having a resilient mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think on social media, we do see, like you said, a lot of misinformation out there. You hear, right, the power of positive thinking. There's so many things. And a lot of times I know, even as a mental health provider, I get discouraged because I'm like, if it was that easy, we wouldn't be struggling, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I do think it is so important to speak to how difficult yet how rewarding it can be to kind of change the way that our brains operate, to change our habits. And it is not an overnight thing. It takes working with really incredible clinicians, providers, having a team of support that has your back and that is willing to hold you accountable. And I think that's something we see so often in recovery, right? Like we need that accountability and that support. That is a huge part of it. And
Yeah,
so,
all mental health, and that's why, like, organizations like both of ours, like Next Level and Soul Skills, like, we're kind of filling a gap because yes, therapy is so important. Yes, psychiatry is so important, but there's a lot of time in between that, right? And then, that's also, and there's so many times where we'll come into a situation where there's a psychiatrist, a therapist, maybe the family has somebody and nobody's communicating, right? And bringing that communication together and the strides we're able to see with bringing the professionals together, with everyone not having the same messaging, everyone on the same page, knowing what's going on in therapy, knowing when there's med changes. So there is such an important piece for people like us that are doing the in between too, because like you said, what do you do at 7:00 at night? What do you do at, all these times in between when you're not on a session with your therapist?
absolutely. And, I think a big part of it is I've always said, like, I want people to be doing more living than they are focused on healing. And I think, Amanda, you probably can personally and professionally relate to this. Like, I mean, we could consume ourselves with the books and the podcasts and I mean, going to the speakers and the conventions and the different providers. Like, there's so much out there. And sometimes it paralyzes us. And, if we can help you get to a point where you feel supported, connected, where you can learn how to regulate, then we know that you know how to ask for help, when to ask for help, and who to ask for help. And I think that goes into we cannot, we don't live in a world where we can protect ourselves from adversity. So we have to prepare for it. And preparing for it means knowing that I have the skills and the support that I need to make it figure outable. And that is my whole thing. Like, we
Yes.
need to remind ourselves things are figure outable.
Yeah. And one thing, the greatest things, I've shared this a few times, but one of the greatest things I've learned in the past few years is not everything has an immediate solution, right? Sometimes it's sitting with it, and that's the hardest thing to do, is to sit, because I've become so solution based, right? We're like, oh, this is the thing, this is what I do to fix it, and this is how I get out of it. And sometimes I've learned there is no solution, and I kind of got lost in sometimes always seeking a solution instead of just like allowing myself to feel and be. And I think I've probably walked through every adversity there is. So I actually have my podcast that I had with my former business partner was called Overcoming Adversity Podcast. And it wasn't just about mental health and recovery. It was like people that lost a child, someone that had a health diagnosis, like, there's so many things in life that people struggle with, And yeah, it's just sometimes the solution temporarily is to just be. And that's one of the hardest things to like grasp, you know?
I think that is single-handedly the most difficult skill, is to sit. And, it is something that I was speaking to a group of parents of high schoolers 2 weeks ago. And, we live in a society where we have so many resources, and it is wonderful to have such accessibility to things, but we are so quick to distract ourselves, right? We're in a conversation, the conversation lags, we pick up our phone. We do everything unintentionally to avoid sitting with our thoughts. And then we wonder, why is there a rise in intrusive thoughts, in panic disorders? And there's so many things, right, that lead to these symptoms. But one thing that we know for sure is if we can teach people how to get comfortable in the discomfort, how to tolerate, like distress tolerance. I don't need you to enjoy sitting with your thoughts. I don't enjoy it. But
No.
knowing we can tolerate it, and like you said, sometimes we have to let it come and let it go. Like we can't fix it. And sometimes the figure outable means accepting where you are in this moment. And that comes from looking at what are those core beliefs of resiliency. And, I know we'll get into that in a little bit, but, Amanda, I think in you being so vulnerable and in, just us being able to speak to our personal journeys and how that kind of got us to where we are professionally, it's being able to relate. There's not anything we are asking any of our clients to do that we have not yet walked through.
Yeah, and still do, and I'll have to be, in all honesty, before I could get to the place of like the just being and just sitting, that took a long, long, long time and a lot of work and and I still like, yesterday I was in a funky space, post holiday, post like go, go, go move. I was not in a good way. And like, I gave myself, instead of like this ridiculous, like I would have done in the past, some ridiculous long list of like things to do to make myself feel better. I did some like small tangible items, like to journal, to go
Mhm.
on a Zoom meeting, to go for a short walk, and to do a quick meditation on my phone. And listen, and whether they were going to make me feel better or they were just going to help me get through the day, I was in acceptance of that, because I think sometimes we think if we do these things, then we're going to feel better, and sometimes we're not. We're just going to like help get through, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's huge. And that is something I always say, like when we are sitting in that feeling of stuck, we feel stuck because we feel like we should be somewhere else, right? We should be further ahead. We feel that when we compare relationships, friendships, careers, our healing journey, I mean, I still feel that. Like I still meet with my providers. I still take my medication and my supplements and go to my chiropractor. Like I still do all the things.
Yeah,
Um, but when we have those moments of that distress tolerance of, I need to just move through this. And I always say to people, like, what is your bare minimum that you can do today?
yeah.
And sometimes, like you said, it's, I'm going to journal for 10 minutes and I'm going to do that one load of wash and I'm going
And
to feel
sometimes it's
proud.
stay in bed. Sometimes like that is a requirement. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
after I've done like whether it's a work trip or like a heavy case that I had to travel for or something, sometimes like my solution is to just like shut the world off and like just
Hmm.
read and or watch TV or whatever or sleep. So it's different all the time. But I
Yeah.
knew yesterday there had to be some tangible, actionable items
Hmm.
because I've been through so much and because I've gone through so many things that like I know what I need. You know what I mean? To make
Absolutely.
my
Yeah. And I think a lot of that goes back to us being in tune with our body. And I think when we struggle, and especially when we experience adversity, our first instinct is to disconnect, is to dissociate. And we all do it, myself included. And, the goal is not to do it perfectly. The goal is to become aware and every day maybe become a little bit better in being able to hold ourselves accountable for being skillful, because our bodies, our brains are designed to avoid discomfort, to avoid pain. And so it's being able to say, my healing journey is not linear. I'm going to take 10 steps forward and then I'm going to feel like I just got kicked in the gut. And that is okay. And it's saying, like, this is part of it.
yes,
And I think it is finding an opportunity to have that self compassion. And I think when we sit and when we look at the difference between resiliency and victimhood, right? Victimhood is sitting in shame. It's sitting in silence. And so many of us in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, and our 50s today, that was how we were raised. We sat in silence and we sat in shame with big feelings. And so I first just want to thank you guys for being on here and for doing the work to acknowledge that you want to do things differently and experience things differently now for future generations than the way we did in the past. Because we right now have the biggest gap in understanding what childhood experiences, what their impact have on us later on as adults. And this is where the change is being made. And it is such a gift for all of you guys to be a part of this.
Okay, so let's get into it. So let's talk about victim, like how, like, what are some, I mean, of course we can get into conversation about it, but like some key takeaways, for people, like I'd love to have a conversation and then to also leave people with some bullet point kind of to-dos that they can leave with
Mhm.
after watching today and say, hey, this is how I can get out of victimhood and to resiliency. If you identify with being a victim, listen, I'm going to speak for both of us. We both can understand that. I can go there real quick and be like, why me? Poor me, you know. And then how do you get out of that and propel into resiliency?
Mhm. So I am someone that personally I get stuck in my thoughts. So I use writing and journaling as an incredible skill for me and tool for me. And I will tell you, if we are in a place of victimhood, let me reframe this, does not mean that we are weak. It means that we are in a moment of feeling overwhelmed with the pain that we are experiencing. And sometimes we experience pain at the expense of someone else's decision.
Mhm.
And that does not mean that it's fair. It does not mean we deserve it. It does not mean any of that. It just means that we feel our body and our mind feels defeated and discouraged. We have to feel that in order to decide that we want to feel something differently. We don't wake up resilient. So I think that is the first thing is recognize that victimhood is a part of experiencing life and we've got to get there to get here. And so when you feel you're in that spiral, just put your hand on your heart to feel your heartbeat. Like that is it. I am a human and that makes it okay for me to have a moment. I do it all the time. You will see me on different videos or things that I've talked to where I just feel my heartbeat. You are living, you are breathing, and you're here, you're trying. So first, victimhood is not a weakness. You cannot work through it if you are not willing to accept that. So that is like number one, golden ticket.
Step one is just kind of, accepting it with some grace and honoring and not being hard on yourself. That's because that will propel into more victimhood, correct?
Mhm. Exactly. And that's where these spirals, we don't know how we got from A to Z. And we've been there. And, whether that is like we experience things all the time. And sometimes we experience things as a consequence for our decisions, sometimes as a consequence for others. And again, it doesn't mean that we deserve it. We don't deserve bad things to happen to us. So when we first say, you know what, I am human, and I'm right now in a moment where I'm experiencing this as a result of someone else, which is making me feel like a victim. So the second step is to create space from that thought. You've given yourself grace for having it. And now you're going to create space. So you are not going to say, I am a victim. You're going to say, I am feeling like a victim. Because what it does is it creates a degree of separation. It is one of the best skills that serves in any area. If we can create a degree of separation, instead of I'm panicking, I'm experiencing a panic attack. Because when it's a feeling or an experience, our brains know it doesn't last forever. We have to
Yes.
use a pro hack. And that's one of it. So I am feeling I am sitting in a moment of victimhood. So
Yeah.
second, you create space. Um, Once you've created space, you're going to see things a little bit more rationally. And then you're able to say, and this is where I go to writing. I write down, what am I at the experience of? What am I at the receiving end of? And I give myself a moment. I hold space for all the things that I am pissed, I am angry, I'm frustrated, I am hurt that I am experiencing. And I just write them down. I let them be there. And I just look at them. Yes, this happened. Yes, I am experiencing this. And I don't try to change that. Because most of the things that we feel in a victim mindset for are things completely out of our control and things that happen in the past.
Yes, and that goes with like, going into like like it's just the acceptance of it, and and just being kind with yourself and like owning it.
Hmm.
Like it's not
And
a shameful thing. Doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you not a good person, none of that.
it makes you human. And, I think this is where I always take a second to create some space from social media in these moments. Social media can be an incredibly powerful tool. Right here, right now, you're seeing two people be vulnerable and show up and share tools. But social media can also be incredibly detrimental to us if it is not used appropriately. And so I create space, because if we tap into comparison when we are in a moment of victimhood,
It's the
we are
worst.
spiraling.
It's the
Okay.
worst.
It's the worst. So the next thing, space on social media. And maybe that's for an hour. Maybe it's for a week. Like, we sometimes have to recognize I don't have the headspace for this today. I don't need to see this person engaged and this person pregnant, and I don't need to see it.
Yeah, no, I take like, I always take at least a month off a year, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 6 months. I take weeks all the time, but I'm really lucky because I have Yasmin who will still post as me.
Yeah.
So that no one like fully knows that I'm gone. So I'm like, Yasmin, I'm gonna take a little break, like just, post whatever you're posting everywhere else for me, because there is some, with the business end of things, like, we have to kind of show face and we can't really go off the grid too long. We can, but yeah, taking space is so important. When I started working on the show Digital Addiction, a few years ago, that's when I was like, really just, and got my certification in digital addiction. I realized that like what I was asking my children to do, I needed to be able to do, and I needed to, take space when needed, because when I'm in it, I'm in it, and I'm making videos and I'm in it, and one beautiful thing too is we can change what we see, right?
Yeah.
I used to follow like I say it's fitness competitors but I had developed like body issues with that. So now I don't follow any fitness competitors. I follow like all spiritual. We can choose. We can stay friends with somebody or connected and just mute them. There's so many tools where you can create your social media to be a safe space when you're not taking time off.
Absolutely. And that is something any client that works with us, one of the first things that we will do with their permission is let's do a social media audit. Let's decide what is serving us and what is sabotaging us. And that's something you can do today. Like spend 5 minutes, set a timer for 5 minutes and just scroll through your, what is it, your homepage, your feed. Just take a minute and look. And if you feel encouraged, then great, you're following the right things. If you feel depleted, if you feel disconnected, what an
Less
incredible then,
comparing.
yeah, let that. Yeah, then we can change it. We can unfollow. We can mute. Um,
I
so I
even
think
told
it's
people that about me. I've said, hey, if there's something that I do that like you don't doesn't make you feel good, like I will not take it personal. Please like unfollow, unfriend. Like I don't want anyone to look at me. I mean, they can, that's their shit. If they want to look at me and
yeah,
cringe or whatever, but like you don't have to stay here. You know what I mean? If
no,
you don't, if I'm not doing it for you, it's okay. Go to what does. Go to what calls to you, what speaks to you. It's fine.
exactly. And what is going to be supportive of one person might be triggering for the next, and that's why we have to stay connected to ourselves to know what those things are. And so taking that time off social media. Then the next thing, and this is, I would say, probably my favorite skill that I use 10 times a day, is using the word and. And I would encourage you guys to put the word and on a sticky note, put it in eyeliner or lipstick on your mirror, and just look at the word and. What it does is from a very young age, like when we start school, if we think about it, what does the word and mean? It means that two things can exist at once. And our adult brain, as we grow up, we forget that. And our brain is drawn to focusing on the negative, right? So if we're trying to get into resiliency, I think there's this idea of positive mindset. But what ends up happening is we invalidate the experience. So, and that's why you hear a lot about toxic positivity. Positivity has a place while we are also validating and holding space for the thing that made us feel discouraged or disconnected.
Yeah.
So, just looking at the word and, you will be more likely to say it, right? If I showed you a picture of the beach every day, you would think more about the beach. So put the word and somewhere that you can see it. And what I want you to do is then use it. give value to two things at once, to two experiences at once. So you've written down your list. You have the things that you are at the receiving end of experiencing. Maybe it is I'm experiencing the repercussions of a relationship where someone took advantage of me.
Yes.
And I am looking forward to learning how to have healthy relationships in the future.
Yeah. Like, yeah. And there's a lot of those ands, like I'm struggling right now, but like I've come so far in so many years,
Yeah.
or I just got my heart broken, but it's an opportunity for me to find growth and healing. There's a lot of this with the and.
Yeah. And so it is something like you can use it with your kids. I talk to parents all the time about like how you negotiate with your toddler. I mean, for any of you parents, bless your heart, you're doing some incredible work over there. Um,
Yes.
and it's you can want to go to the park. You really want to go to the park, honey, and it's time to come inside. What you did there is you validated their experience. You validated their want, and you set a boundary. And we can do that with ourselves. You can even say, I am feeling frustrated that I just got rejected from my dream job, and know that there is a better job out there that is a better fit for me. And so,
Yes.
what it does is it creates a neuron connection in our brain that tells us that we can allow two things to exist at once. And so, today, a simple exercise you can do is write down every positive emotion that you can think of and write the opposite. And I want you to come up with an experience where you felt those two things at once.
Yeah.
So maybe it's excited and anxious. Maybe it is proud and disappointed. And you will surprise yourself with how much you can fill in where two things existed.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good place as a solution for people because, it's not one or the other. And we tend to be black or white thinkers and like, oh, this is going on and this is so terrible. But when you add the word and to it, or you do these things that you're saying, like with the positives, like show that, that maybe they're not negatives, but they're, lower vibration emotions can exist with the higher vibrations. Like you can feel so much love in your heart for the world, but just kind of feel funky at the day. Feel like
Mhm.
everything's great in your life, but kind of be in a dark place. Like all of those things can be, and it helps you to be more gentle on yourself.
It's how we come out of shame. It's how we come into self-compassion, and it's how we feel connected. Because when we sit in complete shame, it is the number one belief that nobody could possibly imagine the pain I'm in. And I felt that before. Like I can own that right now. I have sat on my bathroom floor crying of heartbreak, and I have felt that, okay? I have felt there is not a person in the world that has felt something this earth shattering. And you
No,
know
and
what?
heartbreak definitely feels like that, especially if you've never experienced it before. But I'll tell you, it does give you, for me, I'll speak for myself. It's given me the most utmost compassion for those that had it. I kind of was one of those people to be like, oh, get over it. There's so many people out there and fish in the sea. But once you experience it, it gives you a lot of content, a lot of personal experience, a lot of compassion for others that go through it, and you're not alone. Anything that you can be going through today, no matter what it is, there's somebody that's going through the same thing. There's somebody going through something far worse. We're all, that one quote, like we're all, be kinder than necessary because we're all fighting some kind of battle. We're all going through something, and that can't be more true.
Absolutely. And something that I will share, and it's something that I have been trying to hold myself more accountable for sharing on social media, because I think a lot of people look at me and say, oh, well, she's created a successful practice. Like she must be thriving. There are days I thrive, but there are also days where I'm stuck in a panic attack spiral. And it's important for me to share that because it's not this, and then this, right? Healing's not linear. And so it is finding those new ways to support yourself in new seasons. And this is, something for when we come and look at the difference between victimhood and resiliency. We want to look at the opposite. So, something that keeps us in victimhood is shame. The thing that gets us out of shame is self compassion. So, when you feel that moment of shame, how can I show compassion? And maybe it is taking a hot shower. Maybe you show self compassion by writing a letter to your younger self. Maybe you show,
Shower on the shower note, like
yeah,
And also, the visualization of like what, and it's very helpful of like washing all of the emotion down the drain and all the funk
Mhm.
off of you. Like you can visualize that, and that's extremely healing. Um, Continue. I had
Yeah.
something else.
No, I mean, it is. I think water is one of the most powerful. Listen, it's why I live in Florida.
Yes. Yes.
um, when I am feeling disconnected, I put my feet in the sand and I am so in tune with what the grains of the sand feel like between my toes, what it smells like, integrating my senses because just like you, I tend to disconnect. And again, it's our body protects us from pain. And
Yeah.
so when we look at, okay, so the shame and the self compassion, the next thing is this is happening to me. Now, what if we flip it to what is this trying to teach me? And
And what
I'm
am
going
I
to,
experiencing?
yeah,
To me, like, what am I experiencing? What, how
yeah.
can I grow? Like, what is this going to teach me? Absolutely.
And so
Yeah. And
it's
what,
hard.
yeah, it is hard. And what you had said before, I had lost the thought for a second, but what you had said before about, being like, I always want to be approachable. I don't want someone to look at me and be like, oh, like her life's perfect. She never goes through anything. So like, it's why important. Like yesterday, I did not feel like doing a video. I did not feel like getting on social media, but I felt like it was really important for me to share that I was having a crappy day and like what I was going to try to do to like just get through, because I want, like you said, I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, like I can't reach out to her. She's not approachable. Her life's like, and that's not the case at all. Like there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors that nobody knows, of lots of struggles and a lot of moments of despair and breakdown and setbacks and start overs and all these things that like, it's important for people like you and I to like, let other people know that like, we really struggle too. Like this is not just, we're in solution all the time and life is amazing and
Mhm.
perfect. That's not true.
Absolutely. And I think that goes into really the next tip is silence versus support. And I think connection is, if we can all work towards connection, whether it is connecting with our spouse, connecting with our kids, connecting with ourselves, it is one of the most healing things that we can do, no matter what we're experiencing, what we're struggling with. And so, you know, we feel alone when we sit in silence. And how many of you, as a kid, were told to go in your room because you were behaving poorly, or were shamed for having big feelings? Like a lot of us. And it doesn't mean we didn't have good parents. It means we have wonderful parents that did the best that they could. But we are now starting to understand, and it is hard because we're all trying to heal our inner child while showing up for our children in a different way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I was terrified when I was pregnant. I was like, "Oh my God, I went through so much as a kid. Like my kid's gonna have a terrible life." Like I was just convinced that. And my son is graduating high school, and I've never. I mean, I know I've met a lot of 18-year-olds. I've never met anyone like him. I've never met a human like him. So we
I
can
mean,
change.
yeah, he's a testament to you. And so, I think it goes back to leaning into support and knowing that, like, I talk to parents. I think one of the most valuable things we can do is to learn how to sit on the feeling bench, not just with our kids, but with the people we love. We have this idea that our kids want us to solve their problems. They don't want us to. They want us to just sit with them and know that we are not afraid of their big feelings and big experiences. And
Yeah,
so, what if we took that to our spouse? What if, when they're having a moment, we didn't try to solve it? What if we sat with them? What if we sat with them? What if they felt our physical presence?
my big thing is like, what can I do to support you? Because I know there's sometimes that I want somebody to give me help and guidance. There's sometimes I want someone to listen. And I don't want to hear any input or 2 cents. And then there's other times where I just want to, like you say, sit, be sat
Yep.
with, be loved on. And
Mhm.
that's ultimately what we all want. We all want to be loved.
For sure. It's we crave connection. Our brains, our bodies are designed and wired to crave that. And so, I think one of the most valuable questions we can ask when we love someone that is experiencing something challenging is, how can I show up? I love you and I want to show up. I have ideas, but I'm not in your mind and your body. So, what is most meaningful? Do you want space, or do you want me to sit? Like, giving those, how can I show up? And sometimes people don't know. Sometimes, like, there have been times where I'm like, I can't answer that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's okay. But by being asked that question is so validating for me, because there's nothing worse than some unsolicited advice when you're not looking for it and it's from the wrong person. Um,
Hmm.
so, I just want to say hi really quick. Kathy said, I'm grateful for this. Thank you. Hi, Kathy.
Hi,
Hi,
Kathy.
Serene. Serene just kind of put on there. She didn't say anything, but she's there. So just saying hello to some people. If you want us to say hi, say hello, ask any questions, share any experiences in the comments. We're here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's then deciding, you know, how can I grow from this? Because resiliency is about taking that experience, taking those feelings, and deciding how we want to show up differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we become who we are today with all these building blocks. And all these building blocks contribute to who we are. Who I was at 18 is not who I am at 28, and it will not be who I am at 38. And that's a really good thing. A really good thing.
Well, you're 28.
Yeah.
Okay, so lucky for you, it just keeps getting better. I will be honest because I changed my life at 26. You know, that's when I did like a huge change in all ways. And my son was 18 months old, and I my 30s were amazing. My 40s have been, even better. And so like I used to be in a mindset in my mid 20s that like 40 is old and life will be over. But like, I truly feel like in so many ways, I'm just getting started. So just to give you some excitement and hope, like you in your late 30s, early 40s, the way you kind of come into yourself and accept like all that is you and the stuff you're willing and not willing to tolerate. It sounds like you're ahead of the game by far. But there's just this sense, it's like a spiritual awakening. People thought I was having a midlife crisis when I was about to turn 40, and I changed everything in my life again. And I knew inside, and I didn't need anyone else to know. And I really was having, people thought, my kids thought I was either gay or having a midlife crisis. And I was like, no, like I know what I'm doing, and I know this is what I need to do. And yet I still don't go back on that, 3 years later, 4 years
Which
later.
is incredible. And it's having those moments where people don't have to understand. And they don't it doesn't have to make sense to them because it's not their life, it's not their experience, it's
That's
yours.
a fun place to get to, because when you have like, you share what then you, because community, right? And
Mhm.
connection is super important. Then when you start to be like, I don't need to have everyone understand this. I really don't need any, if I fully know in my heart and my gut, like that's all I need to know. That takes a lot to get to, because I was always used to like needing to be validated from like my circle of trust. And
Mhm.
I came to a point where like sometimes they might not understand me, but I'm doing it anyways, and then they get it, if they don't, they don't.
And that's okay. And I think that's where, as we step into more of that resiliency, right? Listen, we all want to feel validated and seen and heard, all of us. That doesn't go away. It feels wonderful. Um, but when we get to a point where we feel reconnected with ourselves, maybe that's our values, maybe that is, things that we want to create in our life, maybe it's things that we believe that we've pushed down for years. When we feel reconnected, we can actually give ourselves a lot of what we're asking from other people. And,
Mhm.
one of the things that I speak about a lot with soul skills and with, a lot of my families that I work with and adults and teens and children is, what is anxiety? And to me, anxiety is a disconnect. If you gave me a list of all the things that made you anxious, I could almost always guarantee, almost always, because I won't ever say definitively, but almost always, I can guarantee that I can connect all of those experiences to either a disconnect from yourself, from someone you love, from your values, your core beliefs, or a disconnect from your routine. And when we think about it like this, we're able to get into a place of solution and resiliency, because if we're feeling anxious and maybe we feel disconnected from our spouse or a significant other, how can I reconnect? Right? How can I reconnect and how can I realign? And so, what I want to encourage you guys is, in that moment of struggle, when that moment of feeling that anxiety and panic, what am I disconnected from? Myself, my loved ones, my values, or my routine? That will
Sometimes
change.
all the above. Sometimes all the above.
Yeah.
Like I've my family experienced, anxiety and panic, and I've had, they don't come like they used to, but like I remember one time coming back from a month-long yoga intensive in Jamaica. I came back and just all the real life stuff. I was driving down the road and I had to pull over and I called 911. I thought I was dying. So like I get the ones that tell me my heart is going to explode or I'm having a
Hmm.
heart attack. That's my kind of panic. And sometimes it comes when like everything's fine or when I'm like over circuited. And it's sometimes underneath things that need to be uncovered in work. Sometimes I can be like, oh, this is why I'm experiencing this. And sometimes I have no idea where it's coming from at the time.
Yeah. And a lot of the times it's unexpected. And I think that can be one of the scariest things about anxiety and panic, is when we can't justify it. It's like, I'm having a perfectly great day walking the dogs. And why is my heartbeat higher than when I'm in Orange Theory? I'm not sure, because that's happened. And, I think what it is when we can't figure it out, what I encourage people to do is try one act of connection in those four pillars. So, what is one thing you can do to connect with yourself? If when you do that thing to connect with yourself, if you feel a sigh of relief, it was that box. If it's connecting with a loved one, if it's saying, hey, let's do a family game night, if you feel relief after that, it was that box. Like sometimes we have to let our body and our experiences tell us because our mind can't always make sense of it. And so honoring the fact that anxiety, that panic, like we feel disconnected. And, if we reconnect, if we recalibrate, if we realign, everything becomes more figure outable. And whether that what's figure outable is sitting in the space or moving to a solution,
Yeah, absolutely.
we know we can do it. And so, I think like really, I would say the last like biggest thing when it comes to resiliency is deciding how to serve. And maybe serving is just sharing a testimony with a loved one. Maybe serving is starting a nonprofit. It can look in any way, shape, or form. Maybe it's being a mentor. Maybe it's working in that field. But I
Yeah,
think, Amanda, you can probably relate to this. I think some of the most skilled professionals in our field have that personal testimony.
yeah.
And, something that I work through.
Directly affected or a family member is affected, whatever it is, like they've been through something on one side or the other. I always ask people in my field, like what brought you, like what brought you into this? Because it's always there's always a story, and it's usually something pretty powerful, and it's sometimes directly their experience or experience of a loved one or things that they've seen, and they've been called to this. So it's pretty powerful that most people have been through their own things that do this work.
Yeah. And I think, it doesn't mean that, like, yes, are there people that start foundations and businesses and speak around the country? And yes, that is amazing. It doesn't have to be on that scale. Serving can be talking to your spouse and being vulnerable with them. That is serving because you're holding space for when they struggle, because they will, to say, hey, I know they can meet me with vulnerability and connection and no judgment.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Purpose
we,
the serving is a multitude of things, right? It can be on a grand scale, or it could be as something as like seeing someone go through something hard that you've gone through and just reaching out. Like I because I've lost a parent, anytime I see someone that's lost a parent, I make sure to reach out to them, because I know when I lost my dad, I didn't want to talk to anyone that hadn't lost a parent. For me, it was really weird. It was specific. Like I had to speak to someone that was all I wanted to talk to. And sometimes you're going to be just that person that can just be like, hey, I know what you're going through. And sometimes that's just the place of service or understanding things on a different level.
and that helps us feel empowered and connected. And sometimes, like, we can't help the 8-year-old version of ourselves. We can't help the 16-year-old version of ourselves that we so badly wish we could just hold their face and be like, you're gonna be okay, I promise. you
Yeah.
know I wish I could have done that to myself 6 months ago.
Yes.
And but what we can do is we can show up, we can grow. And what I always say to people is, we're all learning, we're all evolving. Like there's not an end date to our growth.
Mm-mm.
There's not, we turn this age and like we're in the clear. And so I think deciding how we want to show up, and I always ask people, and it's a great conversation starter when you're in just any type of helping field, is like, what club are you a part of that you don't want to be a part of? Maybe that's the club of losing a parent. Maybe it's the club of a certain diagnosis. Maybe it's the club of having to relocate all the time. Like, we're all a part of quite a few clubs we don't want to be a part of.
Yes, for sure.
And how do you show up in that club? Do you want to be the financial advisor, and do you want to do the fundraising? Do
Yeah.
you want to be the advocate and go speak to children that are experiencing what you experience? And
Yeah.
so I want to encourage you guys today to think about, what club do you feel shame for being a part of? And I want you to own that and decide how, in one small way today, how you can serve that club.
That's beautiful. I love that. We're going to say hi to Sherry. She said, this is great. Thank you. Sherry's a dear friend of mine.
Hi,
Um,
Sherry. Thank you for being here.
yeah, no, I love that last part, because there's something, I think if you just get asked that question, there's one thing that comes right to mind. And if people are like, oh well, I have a few, the first one that comes to mind, go with that one.
Mhm.
That's the one right there. And I'll share what mine was. Mine was for me to have any body issues. Because I never ever had them until, like, 9 years into my healing journey. And when I started to have them, I was super shameful of that, because I was like, most people I knew that had food and body issues had them from childhood. And I was like, where did this come from? Like, all out of nowhere. And that for me was a lot of shame to walk through. And now I own it more. But when you said, that's the first one that came to mind, because that
Yeah.
was the hardest one to be part of.
Yeah, and it's moments like for me, it's with my panic. There was a time where I was having 2 to 3 panic attacks a day. Sometimes I would have that in an hour, and it was debilitating. I mean, I at 27 years old, this was last year, so not that long ago.
Yeah.
My mom had to fly from Maryland to Florida with me because I felt so disconnected and I didn't feel like I needed my mom and I needed her to be with me, and she physically held me like she couldn't solve it. And listen, like we found amazing professionals, I found medication regimen, I figured out what I needed to feel realigned in.
Yeah.
And for me, I am, when someone is experiencing panic, when someone is stuck in their head with intrusive thoughts, whether that is postpartum, whatever that is, it's, hey, like, I will sit with you in this. There is no thought you can, and I say this to my clients, there's no thought that you will tell me that will not scare me, that I will not meet you with support. And I think it took a long time for me to be vocal about that and share that, because people are like, what do you mean? No, I did. Like you said, you're like, why? I need to pull over. I feel like I'm dying. I felt like my heart was coming out of my chest.
Yeah.
And the more that we realize, hey, I survived it. I survived the things that had the capacity to break me down, and I chose to help them build me up. And I think something I want to, really kind of leave you guys with today is the game Jenga, right? Where if we build the blocks and then we're taking one piece out at a time. It's kind of like our healing journey. Sometimes it's gonna fall, but there are no amount of times, there's no limit to the amount of times that we can pick ourselves up
And
and
rebuild.
keep playing the game.
And
And
rebuild.
that is, yeah. And we play it in community, we play it in connection, and we find joy in the struggle, in the collapsing, in the heartbreak, and in the detriment. And that's why we're going to use that word and.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think this gives so many people. I put a lot of the notes that you said in the takeaways. So if someone wants to find you, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone, for being here on Recovery Solutions today, hosted by myself, Amanda Marino, co-founder, and the sole owner of Next Level Recovery Associates. And how can people find you, Sarah?
Yeah, so they can find me through Instagram at soulskills.therapeutics. They can reach out directly, and one of our specialists will be in contact. If they go on our website, which is soulskillstherapeutics.com, there's an intake form. We offer a complimentary intake call to anybody that wants to work with us virtually, in person. And I can, in the comments, once the videos are posted, I can comment the links on there so you guys can directly click them. And in that intake call, we will just kind of talk with you, help you understand what our role is, how we can serve you, and make sure that it is a good fit. Because we know we can't help everybody, but the people that we can help them really well in collaboration. And Amanda, we are just so excited to share your resources and your services with so many of our clients throughout the US that are going to massively be benefited by the innovative approach that Next Level has taken. And so I'm just always so grateful to connect with people like you that have been committed to being vulnerable and just serving in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'm really grateful Danielle connected us, because I just kind of went on blind faith. This is like my first time you, and I'm really grateful that I am getting to know you. And I think that there's so much synergy, like you said. And we also work all over the US and some other countries as well. Not Australia, but more like London and Switzerland and South America. We have some Spanish speaking team members too, so and others languages. But yeah, no, there's it's time for change. It's time for the next generation, which, like, I'm a next generation, you're even a next generation behind me, but like to change the way we do this, to change the way we help people. Because listen, there was a lot of things that have worked for a really long time, but they didn't work for a lot of people. And so we have to continue to evolve as a community and try new things and try new ways to help people. And every person's story and every situation is different. And there's not a black and white or a cookie cutter method to healing. and everyone should have, I wish that everyone had the resources to be able to, have the kind of care that sounds like both of our teams in different ways can provide. But, I think we're leaning more towards some of it, as a whole.
Absolutely.
Healthcare and insurance and things like that make things really challenging. They want to, authorize someone for like a short amount of time for like an inpatient setting, whether it's mental health or it's substance use. And do it right the first time. Look at the doctors and the nurses programs and the pilots. Like they're like supported for 5 years. Like let's try to support people long term in the beginning. That's why I tell families, if we're your first visit, like I'm grateful for you, or anyone and my colleagues that do what I do, because if they invest on the front end to do this right, they're going to save themselves tons of time and tons of money and tons of
Yeah.
heartache and possibly losing a loved one. So
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think with that, something that above all else, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're experiencing, no matter how in the thick of it you are, I just want to remind you the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. And
yeah,
that doesn't mean that you need a high level of care, but the bravest thing you can do for yourself, for the people that love you, for the next generation, is to say, I'm in a tough spot. Can you help me? And the more we teach our kids that, and maybe that tough spot they're in is their homework or tying their shoe. If we can teach them to ask for help young, they will ask for help when they're older.
it
And
won't be
so,
so hard when they're older, And that's one of the powers of social media is like people feel that have never shared anything with anyone feel comfortable sending a private message, right? And so even if it's that to start, because that's a lot less scary,
absolutely.
because picking up the phone is like it's scary. It was back then. Now it's even way more scary. So
Yeah.
even sending a direct message to somebody that you follow and you trust and that you think that has the right resources for you, send that message today. Pick up that phone if you can, look at the research some things. If you need, Sarah and I, either one of us will, if you
Please.
reach out to us, we will be available anytime. So
Yes.
healing
Absolutely.
is not linear. You can go from victimhood and propel into resiliency, and you can also go back into victimhood and propel back into resiliency. There's no amount of times that we can rebuild the Jenga
Yes.
tower,
And so thank you guys for being here. And, I'm just excited to watch all of your journeys and you guys keep rebuilding and plucking away at that Jenga tower because it is worth it and it is fun. And healing's not linear, but it sure is worthwhile.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely the most beautiful. It's not for the faint of heart, but
No.
most beautiful thing I've ever done. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. Sarah will post after where you can find her directly. I did put the Instagram on there. And yeah, and follow me, Amanda Marino, Next Level Recovery Associates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the things. TikTok, not as much because that's a whole nother world that I'm getting into. But yeah, so thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, guys. Thank you.